Welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and the Poison Pen is delighted to have with us today best-selling author Carlene O'Connor. Before we begin our chat, I do have a brief commercial message. The Poison Pen does have copies of Carlene's latest book, as well as some of her earlier titles, and we would love to have you order a copy from us, either by going online to the bookstore or giving us a call. We'll be happy to send a copy or more out to you. The second thing I need to confess to is that I'm terrible when it comes to pronouncing foreign names and Irish names in particular. So I'm going to apologize to Carlene and to anyone listening in. I'm going to rely on her to give you the correct pronunciation of her characters' names. So without further ado, welcome, Carlene.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let's start with tell us a little bit about yourself before you became an author. You've said that you come from a long line of Irish storytellers. So what's that about?
My great grandmother came over to the United States from Ballymena. And just we have a lot. My grandmother was a librarian and loved to read, and especially loved to read mysteries. And it just seems like that side of the family, actually both sides of the family, but especially the more Irish side, just they were really good oral storytellers. You know, my mom is still fantastic at just telling you a story, even just something she heard or something that happened to her during the day. I don't have that skill. I have to sit and think and write through it, but I admire, and that's part of the Irish culture, I think, just the ability to sit around like kind of campfire stories and just tell a good tale and get the readers involved, or listeners in that case.
Did you have another career before writing, or how did the writing process come into your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I was an actress, went to school for acting, and I did a lot of off-Broadway plays and New York theater. And then I became a certified sign language interpreter. So,
Oh,
and in fact, even while writing my first books, I was working as a sign language interpreter and did that for about 15 years.
hmm.
And even now, I teach a creative writing course. So I've kind of always had a job in addition to writing.
Sometimes you need that as an author.
Yeah.
Um, Murder in an Irish Village launched your Irish Village series and introduced readers to, and I'm going to have you pronounce her name.
Siobhan O'Sullivan.
I never would have gotten that without hearing you say that. Tell us a little bit about your character, and did you know right from the start that you wanted this to be a series?
I knew it was going to be a series because my editor said so.
Okay.
Yeah, the big boss wanted it to be a series. So yes, I did know that starting. And I think when I sat down to create Siobhan, well, first of all, I had to have a good friend whose name is Siobhan and always loved her name. And O'Sullivan is actually stolen from an Irish friend of mine as well. And I didn't realize until I was kind of in midway writing it that her initials spell out SOS, which
Oh,
is so perfect, right?
hmm.
For she began as an amateur sleuth. She's now an actual official Garda.
Hmm.
But I think I peppered her with bits of everybody I knew and loved. And I think authors will always admit there's always part of yourself or who you want to be, you know, those kind of vicarious elements in the character. And then as you begin writing, they really do become their own person and kind of take all those elements that you conceived them with and start to develop into who they are.
Give us a little bit about, is it Siobhan's
Yes, there you
backstory?
go. Yeah.
She has a rather large family, and as you said, she didn't start out as a professional detective. So, how did she kind of come into the storyline?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because when I first started writing her, she didn't have a large family. I guess I'm revealing some
Oh,
of how it's made here. And when I kind of gave the first few outline passes to my editor, he said, I want her to have a big family. So that was really his suggestion. I'm so glad because when I started thinking on that element, then came the O'Sullivan Six, as her brood is now known. So that's how they came to be. And I could not imagine it any other way now. So editors can be very helpful to a writer's journey. And I had actually, the town that I fictionalized is based on a real town in Ireland. And I had visited this cafe that I had fallen in love with. I actually fell in love with the entire town, but I visited this cafe and it was so warm and welcoming, and even a fire going right in the little room, and she had a fantastic cappuccino maker, and everybody else there just drinks tea. So I felt like, oh, finally I can get a good cup of coffee in Ireland. And so I based it in that bistro, and then the bistro became part of, that helped develop the family, and that they ran it together. And then the backstory started to spin from there.
Did you decide to create a fictional town because that's easier for you as an author? You can kind of change things, or talk a little bit about real places versus your fictional.
Yeah, I decided to make it a fictional town because the real town, Kamalik, I didn't want to insult anybody there. Like, it is a very small town. It's a beautiful medieval walled town. So I knew they would recognize their town, and I even stole some of the character names and ideas, and they all knew I was doing this, so they weren't too mad at me. But I didn't want to use the real town, first of all, because, this many murders in Ireland, luckily, is very rare. And I didn't want to insult anybody in this town that I'd fallen in love with. So I have also kind of meshed some elements. And of course, just like characters take on lives of their own, the town has taken on its own fictional life. So it does afford me a little bit more creative license, not to have to, first of all, not upset anybody, but not have them say, they would know more about their town than I do. So I get to have some room to wiggle there.
That's smart. Murder at an Irish Christmas is the latest in the series, and that's what brought you here today. In this case, Siobhan and her siblings are off on the holidays to visit their brother James' fiance in West Cork. Tell us a little bit about the setup for your latest book.
Yeah, well, West Cork is such a wild and beautiful and rugged place. And I really think that lends itself to a murder mystery, and especially a mystery at Christmas. And I was actually listening to a podcast just called West Cork. There was a true life murder that happened there. Now, my story doesn't follow anything about that murder, but it gave me kind of sparked some ideas for using the West Cork rugged setting, because, it is so far out there that if you discover a body, the body may have even been there for days before the guards come upon it. So somebody, especially in winter and time of Christmas, might be able to get away with murder, right? If the right people aren't there to solve it.
Yeah. Both Siobhan and her fiance, Mac Flannery, are part of the Garda now. Can you tell us a little bit about the Irish Garda? Are there major differences between their police force and other European police forces, American police? What exactly are they, for someone who doesn't know?
Yeah, definitely know the differences between the Irish Guards and the American police per se. First of all, they don't carry guns, so that's a big difference. Except the higher up detectives would, Detective Sergeant McDara would probably have a gun. But the other big difference, if there's a murder, the body has to stay there until the state pathologist comes to the crime scene, first of all, to declare it a crime scene and to declare it a murder. So that I found an interesting challenge, because obviously a lot of evidence can be lost or even washed away if it's outdoors. So that's one of the differences in the Garda system. And I think also just the fact that it happens so rarely there. There's oftentimes you'll have a detective sergeant or a forensic team coming out from Dublin, because all these small villages just aren't set up with, crime labs or everything they need to handle a murder.
As the title suggests, your latest is set during the holidays. What is Christmas like in Ireland? Do they have any special customs?
Christmas is really great in Ireland. I finally got to experience it a couple years ago when friends of mine got married a couple days after Christmas. And they had been telling me all along how magical Christmas is at that time of year in Ireland. And just like here, a lot of the same things like here, but to see the little villages all strung up with lights, and the town coming out for the Christmas lighting ceremony. St. Stephen's Day is really big, which is the day after Christmas, because the pubs are closed on Christmas. Then everybody will flock to the pubs on St. Stephen's Day. I actually got to watch the beginning of a hunt. Now, I hope they did not catch the poor fox, but it was interesting to see all the horses and people and hounds and, town people gathered just traditionally, to blow the bugle and watch the beginning of the hunt. And then it does really quiet down, like everybody does, pre-pandemic times even, right? People take time off work, and even my favorite little bistro was closed during that 2 weeks for Christmas,
Oh,
because it really is a family time in Ireland to just, not work and be with family. And of course, the big meal on Christmas Day and Mass and all those things.
do they have any special Irish dishes for Christmas like the Italians do, or?
The Christmas dinner I attended, she did have both turkey. I mean, she had everything. I mean, there was no space on the table, right? There was a big turkey, there was a big ham, and actually her ham, they call it a bacon, but it's a ham, and she put
Mm,
cloves in it and bakes it. But I couldn't think of. They had the potatoes and the green beans. They had pretty much everything I would have at home, but more of it, like 2.0. In Cork, they did tell me that in Guinness, sometimes they put a little bit of like a cherry liqueur, and they
oh,
made sure to tell me that was just a Cork thing. So that was kind of fun to be in on that.
got. And what exactly is January 6th, the Women's Little Christmas celebration?
Yeah, it's interesting because I had just run across it on some online research, and it was supposed to be originally like in Ireland, where the women had spent so much time preparing for Christmas and taking on the bulk of the cooking and shopping and taking care
Mhm.
of the young ones, that they kind of declared that their day to just go out together and celebrate. And
Oh,
supposedly it's a little bit old fashioned, but let the men stay home and take care of everything else. And it was interesting because I questioned Irish friends of mine at different ages, and some of them were like, I've never heard of it. We don't do that. And others were like, I used to hear about that. Like my mom used to talk about doing that. And then I heard people say, well, the young women now are doing it. So it's
oh,
interesting. It seems like it was a long time ago. It was more of a big celebration, and
mhm.
then it kind of fell out of favor. But now some young girls seem to have been taking it up again, which I found kind of fun. So
Yeah, that's
depending on who you
fascinating.
asked, it was either like, what's that? Or, yeah, I know about that.
Now you have another Christmas tale, Christmas Cocoa Murder, which is a novella, and that kind of takes us further back into Siobhan's life. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, it was interesting because obviously when you're doing a series, and my editor contacted me for this Christmas one, the novella, and I started looking at the timeline, and I had big character changes coming in the future. And I said to him, I can't put this book chronologically from when the last novel took place because I can't reveal the big character changes. He said, oh, you can just set it before then, which I thought, oh, that was challenging but interesting.
Mhm.
It's actually set before even the very first Irish village mystery, before she's even officially a Garda. So I found that kind of challenging. And some readers still emailed me and said, I don't understand this timeline because you have to really catch the first few lines on the first page that this is going back in time. So that was challenging, but I also found it kind of exciting and fun. Those novellas that they create at my publishing house are just meant usually around a theme like Christmas or summer. So this was a Christmas theme, the first one in Kilbane. So that was fun to work with.
Did you find it, was there a difference in writing a shorter length like a novella versus a full-length novel? Did you have to kind of retool your writer's kit or talk about that process?
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways you think like, wow, that's so much easier, right?
Mhm.
Because it's 32,000 words instead of 75 to 100,000 words. But then it's also the old saying, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. Like it can be really tough to make sure like everything is in there and adds up right in a shorter piece. So it was both easier and harder, in kind of a weird way. But I like challenges, so I like the challenge. And that reminded me, like another Christmas thing that's different in Ireland is they have pantos, which is
Oh,
a slang for pantomime. So they'll have these big pantomime plays. And in fact, some friends of mine, her little boy performs in it every year. So
mm,
they're usually based on a fairy tale. They're kind of audience interactive, and they're a big deal at Christmas to go to a Christmas panto.
oh,
So it was fun to use that in the Christmas Cocoa Murder because I had never heard of it before, and it's not a tradition we have here. So I always
mm.
like finding those kind of fun differences.
Yeah, that is. Your mysteries have been described as cozy. How would you yourself define a cozy mystery, and what do you think are the key or necessary ingredients to include?
Yeah, great question. So a cozy mystery is usually a small location, right? Just one, like that's why my one small town in Ireland. It's a limited small location. Usually it keeps revolving around the same characters in this location, book to book. In cozy mysteries, it's a more focus on the whodunit and the puzzle and the people. So there's not violence or gore that you would see with a grittier mystery. You kind of
Mhm.
do a light touch or keep that more off the page. So I'm restricted a little bit in that way because it really is the whodunit, the Agatha Christie type mindset of people who want to enjoy the puzzle of a murder mystery without all kind of the horror that murder brings with it. And often there is an amateur sleuth. So they're not an official detective. And that's why I have kind of stretched the boundaries of cozies a little bit when I, in book 3, made her an official Garda. And I had to pass that by the ranks with my editor. And I was really happy he supported that growth of the character.
Oh. Um, let's talk a little bit about your own writing process. When you start a book, do you always have a good idea of the who, what, where, when, and why, or does that evolve more organically? So talk a little bit about your process.
Yeah, they call them pantsers or outliners.
Yeah.
I would probably innately be a pantser. In fact, my very first novel that wasn't a mystery was written that way without, just writing as you go. I'm now required to turn in outlines. So
Oh.
the first thing I have to turn into my editor is an outline that has the whole mystery set up, the who did it, the suspects, everything. So I've been forced to use that method, but I'm a big believer in it now. I mean, forced for 15 years to do it that way. I'm pretty confident that outlining is the way to go, especially with a murder mystery, because you really have to know not only who did it, why, how they did it, the timeline, and then you have to know what secrets all the other suspects are hiding that muddy the whole path up, which is why they don't solve it, in the first
Yeah.
chapter. So they are a puzzle, and I couldn't. Now sometimes it changes, right? Sometimes I
Mhm.
outline it, I figure out who did it and why, and I turn the outline in, and then halfway through writing it, somebody else says, "I did it," and here's why, and that's kind of fun when that happens too. And I always, if it's better, I go with it. And my editor's fine with that too. Now, sometimes I have to resubmit the outline so that they can make sure everything's right in the cover copy and promotions they do and everything.
Writing a series can be challenging because sometimes you don't realize how long it's going to go on. Have you ever written yourself into a corner in one book that you had to write yourself out of further down the line? Talk about series from an author's perspective.
Yes, series are definitely challenging, and I could probably be a lot better at keeping close records. Sometimes what I have to do is just go back to the previous book to,
Mhm,
jot down even ages that change and the
mhm,
character arcs that change. The biggest challenge I have isn't really from book to book, but it started with the first book, which when I was writing the first book, I used the real names of the people I knew and the
oh,
places just to ground me. And the
mhm,
whole big plan was to change them later.
mhm.
Unfortunately, some of the changes I picked were so close together, like Natalie's bistro in real life was Naomi's bistro.
Oh,
And so in the first couple of books, you'll still see Naomi's bistro. And I can't tell you how many
mm,
emails I get, like people, but once the book's out there, they can't change it. They can change it for future
sure.
editions.
Yeah.
So that was something that like haunted me and plagued me was that, I was, and they were so close together that all the editors missed it. I missed it, having that
Mm.
other name crop up. And sometimes I would get confused, like which was the original one and which was the one I came up with. So you have
Mhm.
to be careful with names, especially like from book to book. And I have to be careful that I don't want every book to be the same, even though they do kind of follow, right? There's going to be a victim, there's going to be
Yeah.
suspects, and it's very easy, I think, to make them all alike. And so
Mhm.
with each book, I have to find something new and exciting that, okay, this is the same, but completely different.
Would that be the music element to the Irish Christmas murders? Was that the
The
new
Irish
twist?
Christmas Murders, it was definitely the new location, right?
Mhm,
They're going away for the holidays, so to get some fresh environment. and yeah, the orchestra that came in. And so I could bring
Mhm.
some characters in from London and create some excitement that way.
You have written another series called A Home to Ireland, which features a character who comes from America back to Ireland. Can you tell us a little bit about those books?
Yeah, those books were originally contracted so that Barnes and Noble could have an exclusive on the paperback for the first year.
Oh,
And then the second year, they go in all formats to all locations. So it was kind of a contracted series in that sense. And I knew that I wanted it to be completely different than the Irish Village Mystery series. And so one way to do that was, instead of an Irish-born character, was to use an American that goes over to Ireland, and also to set it on the West Coast in Galway. I love that area too, Galway and Connemara and all that wild, rugged West Coast. So those were a couple ways in my head of separating the stories and separating the characters. So it's an American woman from New York City who's an interior designer. And in the first book, her mother passes away and she's from Ireland and wanted her ashes spread back home. And so she goes to Galway, her mother's home, to spread the ashes. And there's an estranged uncle, and there's an architectural salvage mill, a warehouse that he runs. And I love things like that. I love those shows of architectural salvage and, kind of treasure hunting for all those great things. So in each book, even though they're different, I try to find elements that interest me, so that if I'm excited, then I'm going to do a better job writing it.
I've actually never heard of this kind of arrangement with Barnes and Noble. Is this rather unusual? Do they do it all the time and I just didn't know
I
about
think
it?
they
Or
started it. I don't know if they do it with other publishing companies. They started it with my publishing company, and I think when they were, trying to come up with new ideas. When it's,
oh,
I know, I'm sure you guys know how hard it is to compete with the online orders and the
mhm,
Amazons and all that. So I think that was kind of one of their creative ideas, to just have some exclusive cozy paperbacks.
oh,
And Kensington does so many cozies that
mhm.
they kind of set up this experiment. And there's two so far. I don't know. I haven't heard word yet if there'll be more, but I remember my agent at the time saying they'll have kind of a second life, because the next year then it is the wide release.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm. You can now sell them through other venues.
yeah, and then interesting, they only did it as a mass paperback format, but then the
Oh,
second year it goes to ebook for all the venues as well.
that's interesting. Um, you've been writing for quite a while. What have you learned as an author that you wish someone had told you when you were first starting out?
I think the biggest thing I wish somebody had told me is that your first drafts are just the beginning. Like, they're exciting. That's great that you finished it. Don't hand them in. Don't try to get your first drafts published. That first drafts are kind of bad, and they need to be reworked and rewritten. And it actually takes a lot of drafts to get it to that, good enough point. And there's still always a gap between how wonderful the books are in your head and how they actually come out in book form. And so you're always just trying to, get that gap lower and lower, kind of bridge the gap in that way. But I think I would have said, I used to have a hard time finishing things before I took a writing course that actually helped me. And ironically, it's the same writing course I teach now. Um, but basically, he was saying, let your first drafts be bad. And the minute he said that, I just felt this relief. I'm like, well, I'm already doing that. So that's
Mhm.
okay. Because before, I would stop myself if I felt like I didn't know all the answers, or it wasn't perfect, or it wasn't good. And then it would just stop me dead in my tracks. So it wasn't until I kind of had that advice in mind that I'm like, okay, it's okay that I don't know all the answers, and that it might be messy, and that I'm going to have to fix it. Like, that's the
Mhm.
process.
Your books really celebrate Ireland, and the magic of that country. What do you hope readers learn about Ireland? What is it you're trying to convey about Ireland to readers in your books?
I just want them to have the same experience I've had, which is like, I didn't know you could fall madly in love with the town until
Oh,
I went to Kimalik. And I was so like, just, they have the original town walls, a town castle, a ruined Dominican priory. I mean, the hundreds of years of history. I got kind of irritated. I was like, you have a town castle? I said, I grew up with a White Castle. Like, this is just Not fair. So I want people to see how beautiful it is, how like the people are so amazing. Like that was the hardest part. Like, how do you make these wonderful, amazing, charming people like suspects in murder? You know,
Mhm.
it almost makes you laugh. I love the language. I love the spirit of the people. I love the humor. I love the culture. I love everything about it, you know, except for the fact that I wasn't born there. So I just want people to have, you know, even if it's a glimmer or says, makes them say, okay, you know what, maybe I'll put Ireland, I'll move it topper on my, you know, to-do list.
Fabulous.
Because I think people should see it for themselves and have that experience. And until then, though, I think books are a great way to travel and experience different cultures.
Because you have lived both in the US and Ireland, but now I imagine this year it's been a challenge. How is that impacting you as a writer? Um, how
Yeah.
are you kind of working through it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, this year has been a challenge for everybody. I'm so grateful that before the pandemic, my father had never been to Ireland. And he and I kind of had been planning a trip for a couple of years, and we had put it off for various reasons. And then we finally went in the fall of 2019. And we just 2 weeks there, I was able to show him the town the series is based on. He's one of my biggest fans. He reads all the books. I was able to take, and I was researching for the second Home to Ireland book set in Connemara. So we got to go there.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a challenge. I mean, this year has been awful for everybody. Even Ireland, my friends there say all the counties are on lockdown within themselves. They can't even go outside their county at different points in this year in
Oh,
this lockdown. But they're actually doing better than we are right now, or they've fared pretty well so far. So I hope that, knock wood, hope that
yeah,
keeps up for everybody, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. A lot of writers are also big readers. What have you been reading this year that you'd like to share with other readers?
Yeah, right now, I kind of went through a Halloween phase. So I'm reading Kill Creek by Scott Thomas.
Oh,
And a Japanese author, it's called The Graveyard Apartment. I
hmm.
just finished that one. And something you guys won't be able to read till spring, I read Tracy Clark's latest called Runaway.
Oh,
She writes a murder mystery series set in Chicago. Her latest, I think, is What You Don't See. So I read her, we switch manuscripts with each other. So I read her latest
okay.
as well.
Do you find as a writer that you gravitate towards working not collaborating, but you really get more when you have a writer circle that you can interact with, or are you more of an isolate, more of a you want to do things on your own kind of writer?
I don't know if it's I want to do things on my own. It has been that just I think being busy, having a job in addition to writing, I always
Yeah.
have done things pretty much on my own. The biggest interaction I get with other writers is my students,
Oh,
and so I've always had more of a dream of like when you hear about the, you know, in the heyday, the New York City writers all hanging out in Greenwich Village, you know,
mhm.
yeah, at parties afterwards. I've never had kind of that fantasy lifestyle I've wanted with other writers, although there are some great organizations I'm a part of, Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime, and conferences that I go to. But I think in my fantasy life, I would have like a close knit group of working writers that we all share and help each other. But life is long. Maybe I'll fall into that in the future.
Now, do they sell your books in Europe and Ireland? Can those readers get your mysteries?
They don't. They don't
Oh,
at this point. It would be great if they do someday. I've seen them listed on Waterstone's website.
oh, yeah.
But whether they're actually in the bookstores, I've never had anybody tell me they were. So my guess is no. I'd be pleasantly happy if I was wrong. But my Irish friends, you know, just get it through the through online channels,
Online
or
sources.
I bring them copies when I go.
How has social media impacted you as a writer? I know you have a website, you're very involved. I mean, do you feel that that adds to your experience as a writer, or is it something you have to do because it's expected? Talk about the role of social media.
Yeah, I mean, at first it can kind of seem like a lot of work, and some people probably are better suited for it than I am, like organizing all of that. And I'm not very good at the newsletter. You know, some people like have a regular newsletter that they put a lot of thought into. I try to get better at that. But one of the nice surprising things is interacting with readers and if you have a contest on your website or your Facebook page and they're all commenting. I gave away a Christmas ornament and I just asked people like what their favorite Christmas ornament was. And I was just really touched by all the messages and all the pictures of people's favorite ornaments and their family stories and their life stories just encapsulated in one little Christmas ornament. So there have been a lot of kind of transcendent experiences through that, then it makes me say, okay, there's a lot to appreciate about social media, even if, you can see it sometimes as a puzzle to navigate, a maze to have to navigate as a writer. I do really like having kind of that connection with readers.
I'm sure that the internet and things help you as a writer when it comes to research. A lot of people don't think that when you're writing a contemporary novel, contemporary mystery, that you have to do research, but that's actually not true. Talk a little bit about what kind of things you've had to research for your books, the sources you use, in particular, like the Irish police background. You have someone that you consult with. So research is your broad topic.
Absolutely. I have to research the Irish Guards and Garda. I do have a few Irish people. One that had a friend who was a guard that when I started the book, he was willing to do a phone call with me. He did not want his name mentioned in the acknowledgments. He did not let anybody know he was talking to me. But he answered a few of the questions I had. And then I have people I use people in Ireland as resources that I email friends. And sometimes they don't know the answer, which makes me feel better because there's extra pressure that I'm an American, sending it in Ireland and wanting it to be right. But I'll have to consult my Irish language users if I want to use an Irish phrase, and I'll have to consult the Guard people if I have a question about the Garda, or I do have a friendship with another Irish mystery writer, and sometimes she'll point things out that I'm making a mistake or, give some helpful comments. So I also research like if somebody saw a writer's laptop, right, they would probably haul us away because I have to research methods of murder. If you're using a poison, then you go down the poison rabbit hole, and the locations, setting it somewhere new like West Cork. I had to do a lot of research on West Cork. I'll pull up files to find old newspaper articles on crimes in Ireland so I can see just how they're talked about, the terminology used in the articles, the procedures used. Because there's so few murders, I've been a little bit in the dark sometimes about what the procedure is. And sometimes writers use creative license, like they may not bring in the whole forensic team. They're keeping it between the two detectives, right?
Yeah.
So, but I want to know when I'm using creative license and what the natural processes would be and where I'm kind of straying from that. So I do a ton of research kind of on almost every subject. I often wait until after the outline and the first draft is done to do that work, though, because I want to see what's coming out naturally before I start overlaying it with the truth.
You mentioned the Irish language is a Gaelic that they use there. Is that
People
still
prefer to call it Irish.
Irish?
Yeah, and there are some. I would have to have a degree in the differences between the Gaelic language and Irish language, but definitely for them, Irish is Irish and it's its own language. Yeah. Sorry, what was the question?
Is it still used by? I mean, is it part of their culture on a regular basis?
Most Irish friends I have at least took a couple years of it in school, and so they would know enough phrases, right? And then there are pockets of the country I know, especially on the West Coast, around places like Connemara and Mayo, where you'll travel and you will hear people when you walk into a gift shop and they don't want you to hear what we're saying, they'll switch to speaking Irish. So the level of whether or not they're using it fluently varies, but everybody will have, your phrases or your couple years in school that they studied it and know enough. And then other people will still speak it fluently. So I got like one of those apps I tried, and I have to get back to it. It's a really tough language. Irish is a really tough language. Yeah.
In your recent Murder at an Irish Christmas, you talk about Irish cream, I think it is, kind of a liqueur. Tell us, for those of us who don't know, what exactly is that? The kind in your book is not one you'd want to drink, but there are others that you would.
Yeah. I went every year pre-pandemic. I would go to the Dublin, Ohio Irish Festival, and Irish people come from all over, and musicians. And I was staying at a hotel, and one of the Irish guys there, and I stole him. He had this award-winning Irish cream. It's like Bailey's Irish cream. It's whiskey and cream and sweetened. And oh my gosh, he went on about how his Irish cream won all these awards and how great it was. And I bought it from the gift shop and it was very good. But I wish I had recorded him because I didn't get it as good in the book, because he went on for like 30 minutes about how perfect the land and the temperature and the distance from the cliff and how they feed the cows. And, he had a whole excited spiel about what makes their Irish cream so award winning that he was a character and I had to steal him. So that made it into the book. So I guess be careful if you talk to me and you're Irish, because I'll probably steal something.
What's next for you as an author?
Well, I have coming out in February, Murder in an Irish Bookshop. And I'm very excited because it introduces a new Garda and it introduces a new couple that open the bookshop, and they're a lot of fun. So that's technically coming up next. And then I'm working on the next installment of the Irish Village mystery, and with new elements that I'm having to research and with some major character development going on. So that will be a lot of fun too. And that will be 2022.
Oh. Well, I can't believe how much time has flown by. We're talking to Carlene O'Connor, whose latest book is Murder in an Irish Village. And I want to thank you for letting us into your home and talking with us about your mysteries. I definitely am going to look forward to your February title. Is there anything else you'd like to share with readers?
I think that does it. I just want to thank you so much. And I was telling you in the beginning, it's so great to see your bookshop. And I'm definitely going to come visit in person when this is over. And I hope your readers are supporting you. Support your local bookstores. We need them. We love them. And I hope that you'll do well through the holidays also. Everybody out there, stay safe, be well. Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays. And thank you for tuning in to the Poison Pen's virtual author chat with Carlene O'Connor.
Thank you.
And I think that should give them enough lead. Thank you. You were just wonderful.
You too. That was great. It did. It flew by.
Yeah, they have another one lined up behind you. So we're leaving just a little bit early to give them some leeway for that. But
Okay.
I do want to let you know how popular your books are with readers here and how much I've enjoyed them.
Thank you so
really
much. And will this recording be available for me to share with people, or how does that work?
Yes, my understanding is Barbara, I don't know if you met Barbara Peters or not, or had any, she's the bookstore's owner. Her husband apparently is the technical engineering genius. So he's going to take this and turn it into the podcast, which goes on the store's website.
Okay.
They are off they're like a family kind of trip this week. So it might be next week or a little bit longer, but I'll definitely make a note to let them know that you'd like to know when it's available.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlene. Have a safe holiday.
All right. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.